well. And that's certainly not what we want. We don't want to see that for sure. The FBI defines a mass murder of this type as killing 4 or more persons with no cooling off period between the murders. Stated differently, the FBI classifies mass murder as a single incident in which a perpetrator kills 4 or more people, excluding him or herself. The FBI specifically defined mass murder as a single event in order to distinguish it from serial murder. So, in a nutshell, those are the two main differences based on definition. But the individual motives for mass murder vary greatly. A common motivation for mass murder is retaliation or revenge. Again, think about Columbine. That was more of a retaliation for the way those boys had been treated or the way they felt they'd been treated. And it was like a revenge. They had a list. And you've heard that. You've seen that in several other mass murders. But there are other motivations that are possible, including grandiosity and the need for attention or fame, which I just spoke about. A mass murder sometimes occurs when the perpetrator, who may be deeply troubled, suffers a psychotic break from reality and strikes out at his perceived tormentors in a blitz-like attack. You see those in malls, churches, any place where a large group is together. That's where you see these mass murders take place. Sometimes these serial killers, unlike serial killers, mass murderers are frequently but not always killed at the scene of the crime. Sometimes they'll kill themselves, and then sometimes they're shot by law enforcement officers that are called to the crime scene, which is often referred to as suicide by cop, while other times mass murderers take their own lives in a final and deliberate act of suicide, like they have no intention of living after that. They know that they're going to go in, guns blazing, kill a bunch of people, and then turn the gun on themselves. Again, a textbook example of that is Columbine. From a social psychological perspective, mass murder is frequently an act of vengeance against society, committed by a desperate and fatalistic individual who has no intention of going away quietly or returning to kill another day. It is also important to note that serial murder is currently on the decline, while mass murder, more specifically mass public shootings, are on the rise. Certainly that's something that we chronically talk about in this podcast. We have a decline in, serial killings because of, DNA, scientific technology being so advanced that it's very difficult to get away with these kind of crimes. It's not the same with mass murderers, because you're going to know who did it immediately. You're going to know. They're either going to still be there or they're going to leave a calling card, if you will. It's totally different than someone who is committing serial killings. They don't want to be caught immediately. They don't want things to end. They are feeding a need that they have. So those are your clinical differences. That's your official government, the FBI, psychologists. Those are your primary differences as they have been identified. And they may, again, change over time. They may change again. They may, I'm not sure. I think that they're pretty decisive right now, but they could very well change with time. All right, so the first one we're going to talk about today, the first child that's a serial killer, he's considered to be the youngest serial killer in the entire world. He was just 8 years old when they believed he committed his first murder, and it's shocking to think about someone who's 8 years old. And this is really just what we are aware of. He could have killed before this. That's true of any of these stories. They may have killed hundreds of times, but we only know about a few, and we can only prove a few. So in this case, we believe, or I guess the police in India, they believe that he was just 8 years old when he committed his first murder. And every single victim that he had was less than a year old. he first murdered his 8-month-old sister and then a 6-month-old cousin, and he wasn't caught for those murders. But then he killed a 6-month-old child of his neighbor with a stone and then confessed to it. He was sent to a children's home and vanished after turning 18. And what's interesting about this child is, as young as 8 years old, he is said by people who interviewed him, doctors that dealt with him while he was in that children's home, he literally showed no remorse whatsoever. So what has happened to him between his birth and 8 years old to either warp his sense of empathy, or was he born without it altogether? Now, there are several different articles on him. Some of them, they're typically from 2007, because the date of the murders were during the times of 2006, 2007, and he was arrested May the 30th of 2007. So his name is Amardeep Sada. Amardeep Sada, the son of an impoverished Indian couple. His mother, Chun Chun Devas, said she had left her daughter to sleep at her village primary school while she attended to household chores and returned to find she had disappeared. When villagers confronted Sada, he is alleged to have confessed to the murder, leading them to the place where he had attempted to conceal the body in a shallow grave. After his arrest, police said the boy had then confessed to the murder of his 8-month-old sister 3 months ago and his 6-month-old cousin, the daughter of a maternal uncle, almost a year ago. Superintendent Amit Lodha from the town of Begusare, 90 miles east of the Bihari capital, Patna, said the boy appeared to be a psychiatric case and was now being evaluated by professionals. Well, no joke. That's not that's not news. An uncle of Sada's told local media that the earlier 2 killings had been known to the family and some villagers, but had not been reported since it was considered a family matter. Now, you understand, in India, it's going to be different than the United States. It wouldn't really matter if it was someone related to him or not. He was obviously, in my opinion, he was a murderer when there was opportunity. He took opportunity. I don't believe he was advanced enough to create situations like Dahmer did, by inviting people back, acting like you're going to have a relationship with them or trying to have a relationship with them. This was just a young boy, a young child, for whatever reason, decided to kill, and he enjoyed it. When the police were asked about his mental condition, they said that Sada just smiled a lot and asked for biscuits. He killed these children. He killed 3 that we know of, but he strangled 2 of them to death. 1 he hit in the head with a rock. Those are pretty diabolical ways to die, to kill someone. I mean, we all know that strangling and stabbing are 2 of the most intimate ways to kill somebody, because unless you choke them from behind, you're going to be right there in their face. It's very personal. Even if you are behind them, it's very personal. You're very, very close to them. I mean, within inches typically. And that's a difficult way to die, but it's also a very difficult way to kill someone if you have any sense of right or wrong at all. If you're acting off of passion, where it just happens very quickly, and you don't really have time to think about it, that's a little different, but there's so many different scenarios that we could talk about that can change the definition of what this person is. I mean, this is an 8-year-old serial killer. And he was said to just smile a lot. But he was eventually a psychoanalyst that interviewed him and studied him while he was in the facility said that he appeared to be a sadist who derives pleasure from inflicting injuries. And a psychologist from the university actually said later that the boy does not have a sense of right or wrong. For someone that young, I mean, those are the prime years, 0 to 10, 11. Those children are learning the right and wrong of society. What is allowed in their home? What is not allowed? What's allowed in society? What's good? What's bad? How do we act? How do we act in church differently than how do we act on a playground? There are these societal rules that are just, we learn by doing and by being told not to do, right? But it's bewildering to me what could have happened to him, because we don't have a report of that. But what might have happened to him to cause him to act out this way, I'm going to suspect that perhaps he was born, there's a serial killer gene. His just activated sooner than others, maybe. And the serial killer gene is not a definite. I mean, I don't think you could take every single person that has been a serial killer and test them and find that each and every one of them has that gene. I don't think it's like the breast cancer gene or those type things. It's far too early in that study of that to really make those decisions. But I do think that there are people born that are prone to that. We've talked about it. I've talked about it 100 times. Some people are just born evil. They're just born without that ability to have empathy or care about someone else's feelings or thoughts, or have the ability to think ahead and think, what is it I'm doing and how's this going to impact not only this person, but me or their family? They don't think that way. And it's disturbing for me to think that there's an 8-year-old that could actually do that. Some of the residents in his village started calling him a mini serial killer, which, I don't know if there's any such thing as I guess if they're talking about mini serial killer, maybe just in the fact that he's a small person. But he was ultimately given a diagnosis of a conduct disorder. Now, this was in 2007, so I don't think that they're quite as advanced, and I don't really know how advanced they were in India at that time, but I don't think that we would ever in the United States say that someone had a conduct disorder. It's going to be, like that social psychopathy, antisocial behavior. Those are the kind of things that you see as a common thread among serial killers as they have been identified, mainly in the U.S., but of course they've been identified in other countries as well. One of the children that he killed, he was playing with her, and he took the girl from a mother's lap and went to a nearby field. There he laid the baby on grass and started smashing her face repeatedly with a brick. There was no one around, and her cries could not be heard. When she died, he covered the body with grass and leaves and came back to the house. Late in the evening, her relatives found the baby dead. I have questions. I have lots of questions here. The article says, while speaking to the police, the residents admitted that they were extra careful around the boy, especially after he had killed his sister and cousin, and then added that Kushi, that's the name of the little girl, Kushi's mother paid a heavy price for letting down her guard, even for a brief while. You can't blame you can't blame the family.